Hello. Hello, everybody. Happy Friday. This week went by so fast. So hopefully everybody had, if you're in the United States, hopefully you had a safe but nice holiday weekend or week, depending on if you took some days off for 4th of July. Welcome to this Friday's live Q&A. I'm super excited. Let me just adjust my computer. I don't know why it's all funky today. Because it's my computer, so that's why. So this Friday, we are talking about shadow, how to soften and integrate shadow. So I want to welcome, if you've never been to any of my courses or my programs or worked with me individually, I want to welcome you to my channel. My name is Mary. I am Reverse Journey Wellness and counseling. If you're in Illinois, I'm also a licensed therapist in Illinois. But for everybody else, Reverse Journey Wellness. So I am working through a summer course right now with some clients. It's called the Soul Journey Group Coaching. And each season we have a new set of topics that we work through. And we just finished, was that Monday was our full moon in Capricorn. And so we were talking a little bit about what is the right time to work with shadow. And some people say work with it at the new moon because we have kind of that darkness where we're maybe going into the depths, so to speak, of our soul. Some people say during the full moon where things are revealed to us and maybe have a different perspective. I'm from I don't know. I think anytime's a good time. I always am working with shadow, not only for myself, but with my clients. That's the work that I do is shadow work because we're going into that side of us that we don't want to put out to the world, that we're embarrassed or ashamed of, or feel like there doesn't have value to our positive strengths because of shadow. So I feel like this is a really heavy topic, and I feel also like this is something that probably could be like part A, part B, part C. I feel like there's multiple things that we could talk about with this. Hello, JL. Happy full moon week as well. Happy Friday. I'm so glad that you're here with me. So one of the things that I was thinking about when I was thinking about shadow was, what do I know about it from my work life? So in grad school, we learned a little bit about shadow, and it was something that I feel like now I hear it all the time, and it makes me a little bit nervous when I hear people talking about it in a really casual way, or hey, if you got some extra time, let's work on shadow, where I'm like, oh, wow, this is a really big topic. And so if you've had any trauma, if you've experienced stuff that feels very difficult to hold on your own, I don't recommend working on shadow by yourself. I don't recommend doing a little bit of personal growth work in that regard because I feel like it needs to be in a really safe container. And so I do recommend, like I said, if you've had trauma, to work with a licensed clinical therapist that is trauma informed, that knows how to help you not only heal, but then can provide strategies for you moving forward. And so that being said, so I feel like that's sort of my disclaimer for the day. That being said, we are going to work a little bit, or I'm going to give you some information on how to work with shadow from my perspective. So again, I've said this before, and I'll always say it again: take the stuff that resonates, throw away the rest. Okay, so when you think about growth, because this is what we were kind of talking about earlier in the week, when you think about growth, what do you think about? Do you think about things that came to you, hard work paid off, or there just happened to be a moment of good luck and fortune? Was it like, because I put in that struggle, or because I really sacrificed part of me, then something helped me grow? And I think a lot of times we do think about the growth coming from luck or good fortune or because of something that's not internally with us. But sometimes I have to remind people that through struggle, through disappointment, through trial and error, through getting really uncomfortable with whatever the status quo is, that's where we do most of our growing. It's from that place of, I don't want to feel this anymore. I know that there's more for me. That's where we start to think about, like, okay, what are my current life circumstances? What do I want for myself? How do I move forward? It's really when we start looking at what's within us at our core that we start to realize that this isn't aligned anymore. You know, the things that I've thought, whether it's mindset and beliefs, which we sort of talked about. We have this running theme of abundance throughout this group coaching. So you'll keep hearing me talk about that piece of abundance, but we might feel like there's something that's that I'm deserving of, even if I haven't put that hard work in, just because I'm here, just because I'm human. And I want to support that, and I want to validate that for you, that you don't have to do any of the struggle. You don't have to go through the hard work to have value and worth. But sometimes that's when our growth happens, when we've had that struggle where it feels like we sort of hit the proverbial wall, right? And so I didn't take a lot of questions, or I didn't receive a lot of questions about this topic. And I think probably because for some people it's a head scratcher, and for other people they're not really sure what to ask. And so I took the conversations that I had during this week and sort of created an outline about how do we soften, how do we integrate shadow into our wholeness. And so sometimes we can have that, I hate to say, the coming to Jesus moment where we are faced with the reality of the situation, and that shifts us to, or that prompts us to make some shifts in our life. It can be that, can also be, you know, just the natural evolution of you. And so I did have some notes for myself, so I'm going to talk a little bit from that. So let me give you just the briefest. It's going to be so brief. It's going to be so simplistic. Let me just give you the Reader's Digest version of my understanding of shadow, the perspective that I was trained in, and how I work with clients for shadow. So if you don't know anything about psychology, totally good. There was a Swiss psychologist. He wasn't a psychologist. He was a psychiatrist, and he was a psychoanalyst. I think, well, it's Carl Jung. I think he was born maybe in the late 1800s. I'm so bad with dates. Late 1800s. I know he passed in 1960, 1961, something like that. But he was really one of the contemporaries with Freud, and sort of broke away. Some of his concepts were a little bit different than Freud's. And basically what he created, what he founded, was analytical psychology, which really means that for a person to sort of to feel that wholeness of self, there needs to be some level of self-knowledge that is really looking at stuff from within. It's sort of the concept of bringing the unconscious to the conscious. So stuff that we're not really privy to in our day-to-day going is about, you know, is something that is brought to the conscious mind that we're aware of. And how he did that was a little bit different. In some respects, there were some similarities with what Freud was doing, but in some respects, he had some quite different ideas. And so it was through like dream analysis. He would look at these, you know, what was coming from the unconscious mind, looking at the symbols of dreams as opposed to like, this is what, you know, the dream is literal. He also looked at like the creative elements, whether it was art or poetry. He would also look at imagination, word association. So it's all kind of tapping into that unconscious mind, bringing it forward, making the unconscious conscious, so that people could grow, basically. And so there was a lot of different there was a lot of different concepts, I'll say, that he spoke of. And one of them was, and this is where the break is with with Freud, was the collective unconscious. There we go. And that was basically that we all have knowledge. Humankind has knowledge of similar things, even if they haven't had similar experiences. And that was really interesting because he wasn't really talking about stuff that's passed down generation to generation, but we just know it. And so there's that question of like spirituality and mysticism that sort of comes into his work. When I was in grad school, it was kind of like, oh, well, there's not a lot of science, hard science behind this. And now that I've been doing this work for over 25 years, I'm like, yeah, I totally get that piece. The spirituality, the mysticism, understanding the connection. We know that from the natural world, from the root system of plants, including trees. So that was something that he started to talk about. And within that, so some of those other concepts that were so not technically inherited from generations, but were this thing called archetypes. And there's a variety of archetypes. And one of them is the persona. It's the I call it like the company face. It's like the mask that we wear in public that we want people to believe is true about us, believe that is who we are. And that persona is sort of hiding the shadow. And so he has a bunch of different archetypes. Shadow is only one of them. But so we're in this challenge of hiding that shadow from other people with this persona. And the concept is that the stuff in the shadow is stuff that we're, like I said before, embarrassed about or feel some shame. It's stuff that we don't maybe value. And so we want to kind of keep that suppressed. And what happens when we suppress that is we suppress part of ourselves, obviously, but then also it creates tension with us because some part of us knows it's back there. And some part of us knows I'm actively resisting putting that out there. So that can create some conflict for us, obviously. And so if we can return to whole, if we can bring that unconscious to the conscious, and sort of hold space for it, that we can, for me, my language is find the love and compassion to support it. But then that there's meaning. We're bringing a sense of contentment to us. There's peace. There's ability to be productive. That permission to follow our dreams, follow our desires, to really get clear on our values so that we can pursue our passions and really feel like we're living our life in integrity, really. And so Carl Jung sort of spoke about that. I think that's where a lot of people understand shadow work from. And then I see it in a whole bunch of other areas too. So not to say that he was the first one to ever talk about concepts like this, probably not. But this is what kind of brought it to me, and I think to others, to the forefront. And like I said, we learned about Carl Jung in grad school. Analytic psychology was something that we touched on, but again, it sort of was poo-pooed. Like better phrase for that one, but it sort of was discounted as like there's this spiritual side that we can't really like quantify or qualify. And so that was a really long period of my career where I was like, yes, we can't get that abstract. And we totally can. There's value in that. So I don't know if other people have heard of shadow. We talk about it with the moon, with the lunations of the moon. We talk about it with most personal growth. I think people have heard the phrase of like, I don't know, dark nights, or, I don't know. People have probably heard of that, but I don't know. Have you heard of that? Or in what reference have you heard of shadow? I got some interesting feedback from some clients at the beginning of the week with this. So I don't know. Anybody have any thoughts about where they've heard this or what they know about this? Or if you've done your own shadow work, that would be helpful too. Just wait for the chat to come through. And if not, that's okay. We can move on. So I have some notes to myself. JL says, I have it usually as a bad thing or something that's hidden. Yeah, it gets a bad rap because it is something that's in our unconscious mind, and it is something that we don't want to bring forward. Yeah, I love the idea of embracing it. Me too, because then we're really loving ourselves wholly and completely, without exception, without limitations, sort of shedding whatever embarrassment there is for whatever shows up for us, right? And the crazy thing is, when we learn about where shadow comes from, it's very easy to detach ourselves from it. Before we get that knowledge, I feel like it's very interconnected, interwoven with who we think we are, and so I think when we release some of that, I think it's huge. So yeah, it's I love shadow. I'm biased, but I love shadow work for myself personally and for clients. And so I just had written down some notes for myself. Oh well, yeah, I already gave you the disclaimer. You probably want to work with somebody if you haven't done any shadow work of your own. And you have had trauma, I would really, really recommend working with somebody that can support emotional, mental, and spiritual concepts that arise during the process, because it can be heavy sometimes for some people. So what are the benefits? I know I just talked about a couple of them. So what are the benefits? So a few weeks back, we talked about intuition and developing your intuition, working with your guides to kind of foster that connection. I know I listed a bunch of different ways that you can increase your intuition. This is one of the ways when we start working with shadow that not only can we begin to trust our intuition, but there's a return to trusting. There's something that we've already known that either we're returning to or remembering. And this is so important because I think as little ones, as kids, we trusted our intuition. We just worked off of our intuition. And that sort of gets suppressed and smashed down by family, by culture, by religion, by a bunch of different things, all mostly under the guise of keeping us safe. But that's one thing that we want to return back to, is really trusting our intuition. And with shadow, when shadow pops up, we are in this fear state. We're in this really stressed state, and so we're not really sure, is this fear or is this intuition? And I think when we work through the shadow work, we really get a sense of like how it feels, how intuition feels, so we can really trust that. It can also, so this is my take on it, but it can also reinforce your emotional foundation of unconditional worth and value. I feel like whatever cracks, whatever chunks of concrete are missing in that foundation of worth and value, I feel it gets solidified when we work with shadow, because we release all of those things that we tell ourselves that we're not good enough, or we're lacking, or there's something that we should be embarrassed or ashamed of who we are. So it really, really forms a solid foundation for us, and all we can do is keep growing from that point. It really builds our self-esteem. Somebody, Crystal Court says, does listening to Metallica count as shadow work? It helps me. Well, I'm biased because, just side note, as a kid, I listened to pretty much all metal. I always say to people, I kind of lost some of my hearing at Metallica concerts, because I bought front row tickets for 2 concerts back in the early 90s. So does it? Maybe. It depends on what you do with it. It depends on how it, yeah, totally. So it depends on what comes from that, because I mean, just a side note, Johnny Got His Gun. If anybody wants to work on shadow side stuff, there is a book. It's an old book but Metallica wrote a song about it. So I feel like you sort of go into some of the psyche with music, period. It doesn't have to be just metal, but and now I pretty much listen to everything except some pop music and yeah, stuff like that. But anyways, so yeah, maybe, absolutely. It depends on what you do with it, but it can totally work. It also gives you music gives you a sense of connection, and that's what you really need working through shadow, because when you are stuck in that place of shadow, you don't feel connected. You feel isolated. You feel like, I'm so different than everybody else because I have this thing. And so music does bring us together. It does make us feel like, oh, they're talking in the same stuff that I'm thinking, or they're expressing the things that I'm thinking, I guess is a better way of saying it. And so it makes us feel like we have somewhere that we can go and feel safe and accepted and known. So yeah. Another piece of this that I put down for benefits for softening and integrating the shadow is you start to recognize that you actually have a lot of positive qualities. You actually have strengths. When I start to work with a client that's really struggling with depression or anxiety, and I ask them, like, what are your strengths? I would say 9 times out of 10 will say, I don't have any, or there's nothing I like about myself. And inwardly, I'm like, and outwardly, I'm like, no. Either way, they're going to get my reaction of like, there's so much more to you than shadow. There's a whole other half of you. And so how can we look at that? How can we support that? How can we bring that into the world? How can we feel like those strengths that we have are such value, not only to myself, but to anybody that interacts with me, anybody. So I think that's another piece, is that we start to hold space and feel good about our positive strengths, or positive qualities. Again, I think family, religion, culture can get in the way when we're young. Don't brag. Don't be too boastful. Prideful is a bad thing, right? We get all of these messages, and so we're like, yeah, I got to tamp it down. I can't be excited about that A I got, or I can't be excited that my goal, won the game or whatever. And the reality is, we should get excited about those, and we should be able to share those things. And the people that we share them with should be open to receiving that for us as well. We need to have those people in our lives that are like, yeah, you totally rocked it, right? We need to have that. And if we don't, we have to start thinking about, who am I surrounding myself with that I can't share those positive, again, strengths or qualities with, and that they're not receiving it as well. Why aren't they receiving it? That's their shadow. So just so you know. So another thing that I had put down is you feel less led around by your emotions. And I always imagine, like, like the bull with the ring here, the nose ring, and like getting pulled by that. Is that we get so much into that negative emotion that we're fueled by that. And so that's sort of a caveat for, like, yeah, can I really work through shadow with metal? If it keeps you in a very angry state, a very agitated state, a very adversarial, just feeling, sensation, stance, that's not necessarily a good thing. Like, we need to kind of get revved up to create change for ourselves. But we don't want to be stuck in that, because then we're going to be very reactive, and we want to be in control of ourselves. And so we also want to hedge that we're going to be reactive to other people's expectations. And so I think integrating that shadow is a huge way to get that clarity on what your inner compass is. I also put down that it releases all the energy. Oh, yes. It releases all the energy that you're using to suppress the shadow. So believe it or not, it takes a crap ton of energy to put that persona out to the world, to have that company face, and to keep this in the background. A ton of energy. And when we stop focusing on what I want to keep hidden or what I want to keep from other people, it just opens up so much energy where we have we have freedom. We can be open to explore other aspects of ourselves, of our interests, of our passions. It just feels like a weight is released. Crystal Quartz says, for me, it's a catharsis. Get all the negativity, then I'm zen again. Yeah, no, that's fabulous. I like that. As long as you don't get stuck in that, like type of mentality. I like that it helps to release. That's a safe way of releasing, definitely. So good job. The last one I put is it sets you on a path of opening to exploring your purpose and your passions. And so I sort of just alluded to that. But when we're not fighting, when we're not resisting, it sort of opens a new door for us of like, what do I actually want to receive? What do I actually want to do with my life? Where do I actually want to go? Instead of being in that stuck and stagnant place of fighting our shadow. So for me, it's a huge release. So hopefully through a little bit of information, you guys will feel that way too. Okay. So if you're here because you want to be exploring shadow on your own, and I know I already gave you that disclaimer, but I'm going to give you some ways to start exploring it on your own. So if you get into a tizzy, if you feel stuck, if you feel like things are coming back, if there's any traumatic memories or experiences, sensations, reach out to a therapist, please. But I'm going to say the first one is getting honest with your life and your life situation. That's one way to start exploring your shadow. And I want you to know that I don't necessarily mean just looking at the negative or the things that don't feel great. So even in the darkest skies, you can still see some stars, right? And so we also want to look at what is realistic. So oftentimes we tell ourselves like, my life is terrible, or things aren't going my way, or I'm really stuck. And the reality is there's other stuff that's happening that's positive. And so we do want to look at both of those sides. We also want to kind of pull ourselves back in that process and look from an observer's viewpoint. This is one thing that I like about therapy, because people will come and tell me whatever their struggle is, and I'll see the other side of it. I'll see what is actually happening. I'll see where they are making strides, that they haven't given up hope, that they're still trying. And to me, that's just as huge as the crap that's happening that feels heavy. So we have to be honest and look at the full situation, or our full life, our full, our good and our not so good, right? And to not deny that it's there, not to deny that the good stuff's there, not to deny that the bad stuff is there. Bad, air quotes. The other thing that you can start doing is giving yourself permission to feel your own feelings. So I think we talked a little bit about that previously. But again, through family, through culture, through religion, we get a lot of mixed emotions about feelings and how to express them. And I can say, and you got to just take it for what it's worth, but I can say that all emotions serve a purpose, and all emotions are healthy, with the exception of shame. That does not serve us, and that's not healthy. But all of them are. It's a natural reaction. It's a natural response. The thing that is not healthy is if we choose to act upon that feeling or that emotion in a way that hurts other people, in a way that hurts ourselves, or is somehow damaging. So we can feel the feelings, we can express them in a healthy way. That's the big underline that exclamation point, in a healthy way. And so that it doesn't feel like emotions are bad. So if you're giving yourself that permission to feel, you also have to give yourself permission for compassion, self-compassion, self-love, self-care. We'll talk a little bit about that later as well. But giving yourself that permission to explore what you're feeling, giving yourself that permission to say, it's okay that I'm feeling this. It's okay. It's okay to be frustrated. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to be angry. But what do we do with that, right? So those are strategies. Again, I feel like I'm going to be a broken record today. So those are strategies that you can talk to a therapist about, or maybe even looking on personal growth sites or something about like, how do I do that? If you need more information, feel free to reach out to me. Another way that you can start to explore is beginning to open or just wonder about what needs to be explored. And I know that sort of seems like a silly statement, but sometimes we're not even sure, like, well, what's back there? Like, what's in my or what's in my unconscious? Where is my shadow? What is that? And so we just want to be able to witness or acknowledge so that we can heal, right? So we can integrate what's back there. And we do that from a place of love and acceptance of ourselves. We accept all aspects of ourselves. So how do we start to do that? So Crystal Court says, it's sad how many taboos are still on negative emotions and how to express them healthily. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think we have just seen in the past 5 or 6 years, just an explosion of negative emotions. And we see it on the news, we hear it in politics, I hear it from conversations with clients, friends, family, all that kind of stuff, where, there's just so much, there's so much negativity, but then there's not that same acceptance, like that's okay to be a complete jerk on TV or against a political opponent or whoever. But then it's not accepted for you to explore, like, I'm kind of upset, that thing upset me. Or, this really made me frustrated or sad or angry. That part's not accepted. That's still kind of like that toxic masculinity that we're trying to move away from. Hopefully we'll continue to embrace the divine feminine to soften that. But so where does shadow come from? So this is an interesting thing. I don't know if you guys have an observation. If you've done your work, you can kind of guess where it comes from, or where it comes from. But does anybody kind of know where it comes from? It's not, I'll give you a hint, we're not born with it. It's not something that we come here with. I know chat takes a little bit of time, so I'm going to give you the answer. It comes from our childhood. So our parents, our caregiver, some adult or authority figure in our life reacted to us. We did something and they reacted. We said something and we reacted. Subconscious, yeah, but it's because of what they did. So they reacted to something that we did, and then we interpret that reaction. We take their reaction and we give it a label, we give it a message to ourselves. So we can hear these messages, or we can see this reactivity from adults in our life. Children shouldn't be seen, or shouldn't be, no, they should be seen, not heard. I guess some people might think that they shouldn't be seen too. I shouldn't express myself. I need to be quiet. I can't rock the boat. I'm difficult. I'm unlovable. I cost the family so much money, right? The world's unsafe. Like something that we say or we do creates a reaction from an adult in our life. We take that reaction and we create meaning out of it. And the crappy thing is, it's usually not, I can do this, I'm brilliant. It's safe to explore. One of my favorite quotes is, most of what a child learns is caught, not taught. I love that. Yes. Kids absorb everything. And what they absorb is through their little lens, right? They make sense of it the best they can, and they try to modify their behavior to be in line with whatever they think that expectation is of the parent or the caregiver or the adult or whoever it is. And sometimes they're it's on, and sometimes it's a little off. And when it's a little off, it ends up becoming shadow. So if we feel embarrassed, if we feel afraid, if we feel ashamed, or feel shame by somebody's reaction, we sort of interpret that and hold on to it. The brain remembers everything. It's crazy. So that's where it really comes from. That's where shadow comes from, deep rooted from our childhood. So somebody had asked me, so if it's in my unconscious, how do I recognize it? And I think that's a fair point. So how do you recognize it? And this is always something interesting, because people will say, oh no, I'm not really aware of what my shadow is, or I'm not really aware of where that came from. And then I give them 2 exercises, and they can immediately pick up on where their shadow is. So one of the things that you can look at is thinking about people that you know in your life, people that you've had interactions with, or you currently have interactions with them. And there's things you don't like about them, things that get under your skin, things that irritate you, things that annoy you about them, the things that you're like, this person is this, or they do that. Okay, so the tough piece of that is you are recognizing them and you're picking up on them because on some level it's something you either do, that you're not fond of, that you're not happy that you do, that you struggle with, that it's an area of contention for you, for yourself. It's probably you're picking up on what's in your shadow in somebody else. And that's why you can really find it quickly. The brain loves patterns. And so it is very, very good at picking up on those things. And the reason why we don't like it in other people is because we don't necessarily like it in ourselves. And so we do have to tread softly through this with love and compassion and see, is this something that I do? Is this something that I struggle with? Is this something that creates stress for myself? Is this something that I'm trying to avoid? Is this something that I don't want others to think about me in that way, that regard? If so, that can be shadow. So that's the first way to figure it out. The second way, you're like, I have no connection, no interaction with other people. Is do a little bit of information gathering about your family tree. So we're not going to do like a huge genogram, but we're going to look at different people in your family. You can put grandma and grandpa up here, and then their kids, and then how everyone's connected, and see, are there certain traits that people have within the family? Grandpa Joe, I don't know, took shrapnel in the war and always had problems with pain medication. And, his son then had problems with alcohol, or we can kind of see those patterns. I'm just making that stuff up. But, we can see those patterns. Or somebody has a belief about money. Somebody has a belief about relationships. This whole side of my family, all marriages end in divorce, or people never got married. It's stuff when we start seeing patterns that we're like, okay, what part of that have I bought into, basically, right? Is there an expectation I have? Is there a belief I have? Is there a mindset that I have about something? And so that is one way to like clue you in on like, where should I be looking for myself with shadow? So I know it's sort of hard to be like, oh, there's where it is. But that's okay. I'm laughing because it's like, we all have shadow. Everybody has to know. Every human has shadow. Every human. Poverty consciousness is big. Oh, it totally is. We talked about lack and scarcity. Last time, you can check that out, or you can listen to the Lakshmi meditation that I have. It is huge. And we are being reminded constantly by consumerism that we don't have enough, or we don't have the right thing. We have to get the new, the best, the greatest. It's like one of the reasons I'm an Android fan, because I don't want to hear about the new iPhone that comes out that everyone has to have, right? Why do you have to have it? I don't know. But anyways, yeah. So when we think about how we're still being led into that poverty consciousness, it's huge. And part of that with scarcity is that we want to keep our feet moving. We want to keep working towards survival, but it just gets wonky in the way. Poverty and worthiness. Yeah. And I think, again, we keep seeing that over and over and over and over. And even some laws that have recently changed, we're getting that message that, like, I can't care for myself, or I don't deserve a level playing field, or my needs don't matter, right? So I feel like it just keeps getting played out with this. And again, it's kind of like that toxic masculinity. Again, hopefully we're moving away from that. But I think that creates a lot of wonkiness with our shadow. We want to protect that. Crystal Quartz says yes, worthiness. So, what can you do? So if you are still like counseling for the birds, or it's not right for me, or whatever it might be, I'm not gonna pressure people to get into that. I'm gonna tell you what has also worked for me on my path. So I am a therapist. I go to my own therapy. I work on my own stuff, right? But I also do, they call it complementary or alternative medicine, which really irks me, because I see so much value and so much benefit in all the things that I'm going to talk about, that I feel like it should be one of the things that are like, no, this is medicine. This is how we heal. This is how we move through stuff. So the first thing, if you're like, I still want to work on shadow, but I'm not really sure how, or I want to have support, find somebody that is trained is important, but acupuncture opened this world, this woo world opened up for me when I started getting acupuncture. And I went for a physical complaint. And the woman that I was working with was like, it's no surprise that, so I had a miscarriage and I was struggling with migraines. And she said, and I had been diagnosed with a thyroid issue, autoimmune. And she was like, well, of course you're having these issues because your whole system's out of whack. And it usually doesn't start with our physical body. It starts with our energetic body. Emotional stuff kind of comes in, and eventually it makes way to the body if we haven't resolved it or released it. I love acupuncture. Find somebody that is trained and qualified, obviously. That just goes without saying. I loved the woman that I worked with. She just was a miracle worker for me. But the other thing is, it allowed me to release stuff that I'd been holding onto that I wasn't even aware of it. And she and I would have conversations. She'd come in and she'd look at my tongue, or she'd take my pulse, and she'd say to me, why are you so angry today? And I'd be like, how does she know that? It was just wild to me. And I'd be like, I don't know, I'm not angry, right? And then it was really like, oh, yeah, I guess I have been really frustrated at work, and I'm angry about, at the time, my pay and how much work I was putting in, whatever the circumstances. But, that was one way that I was able to release energy, was able to understand that mind, body, spirit connection. That softened me. I was so surprised when she asked me, just matter of factly, like, why are you so angry? And I was like, no. And it was like, oh man, I actually am. I was super, super feisty as a young person, and very angry for years. So that was just one way of kind of getting in touch with the rest of myself. So acupuncture, totally give a thumbs up to starting that process of integrating and definitely softening any shadow. I'm biased again on this one, but Reiki. Reiki is a fabulous way to integrate shadow. Stuff that we are not ready to talk about, stuff that we're not aware of, stuff that we're like, I don't want the counselor or the therapist to know about this stuff, can dissipate with Reiki. Not only, again, we're going into that mind, body, spirit connection, but we're releasing things that aren't there. JL says, I'm so sorry. Oh, thanks. Yeah, no, good. I never would have thought of trying it. Totally going to try it. Yeah, it's fabulous. And I will give you someone local. She's a little bit of a hike for you, but she's just absolutely fabulous if you want that. So I can shoot you a message with that. So with Reiki, I just feel like I'm able to go within. I can set that intention. What do I need to maybe work on, or what is coming up for me at this time? Okay, awesome. You're welcome. You know, it's really to me sort of bypassing the conscious mind, getting to the unconscious mind in a really easy way. If you've had distance Reiki, or if you had in-person Reiki, you've probably had a positive experience. I've never had anyone say, "Ooh, I didn't like that." I've had one person get uncomfortable because some of the messages that came through, he was not ready to hear yet. And so knowing like what where you're at is really important as well. But I've never had anyone say like, "Oh, that was uncomfortable," or I didn't like relaxing. Relaxing's the worst. Yeah, no one says that. So Reiki is a really good one. Now, I'm not a doctor. I don't have any medical background, but I will say, oh, thanks. JL says your Reiki is amazing. Thank you. I will say this has also helped me, and it's mind-blowing how simple this is, and why aren't we all receiving this? It's Bach's Flower Remedies, BACH, like the composer, or crystal quartz, if you ever listen to Skid Row, Sebastian Bach. But so Bach's Flower Remedies. They're little tinctures. I don't think I have one. They're little. I do have one. It's way over there though. They're little bottles of flower, plant, tree essences, and there's a. You can either go and find a practitioner, a Bach practitioner. She or he can help you figure out which one is the best for you. Or you can go online, go to the website, and it breaks it down. This is going back to like the late 90s. I was really struggling with letting go of a relationship that was not great for me. Let me tell you, it was not a good relationship. But I just kept going back to like, what if, or could it have worked if we did this, or, you know, what happened? And for whatever reason, I was so distracted. I do know the reason. There's a little bit of shadow work I had to do, but you know, I just couldn't release that. And even though I was in my own talk therapy, it was like I was a broken record. I just kept talking about it, but I couldn't get over that hump. And so the psychologist I was seeing recommended Bach's Flower Remedies, and I went to a practitioner, and she gave me a couple different things to work with. And it was so funny because the next time I came in to talk to him, he was like, "So, you know, how are you doing with this relationship?" And I was like, "Oh, I hadn't even thought about the relationship like at all." And before, it was like almost consuming my thoughts. You know, when you're in your early 20s, it's usually what happens. But, you know, I hadn't even thought about it. And it was mind-boggling to me that just taking this thing that was going to support releasing old memories, supporting new opportunities, whatever that combination that I was taking, you know, was supposed to help with. It helped with it, obviously. And so I am like somebody that's always like, if you are struggling with something and you're not finding relief, think about Bach's Flower Remedies. I know some people there's an already, I can't even remember what it's called, like just a concoction, for lack of a better word, for stress. And I can't remember what it's called. Rescue Remedy. I don't really find benefit with that, but I know other people that have. And so you can kind of, you know, play around with that and see. So it's not going to interact with any medications unless you have an allergy to something specific in there. You know, you probably wouldn't have any interactions. However, I will say that it was originally suspended in brandy. I'm pretty sure it's still in alcohol. So if you have a problem with alcohol, I would not recommend Bach's. So I don't want you to ingest anything that has alcohol or that could lead to a relapse or anything like that. So if you have any struggles with alcohol, don't go the Bach's route. But That's an option too. I just think they're absolutely fabulous. And they're relatively inexpensive. Like a little thing is like maybe $20, and you can even get them. You can get them online. I used to get mine at like Whole Foods or Fruitful Yields we have in our area, so I could get them there. Super easy. They're liquid, so you can drop it onto your tongue. You can put it in water and just drink it during the day. I think it's absolutely fabulous. Okay, so another one that I really love. It is it is so weird in concept, but it's so fabulous. Is EFT, Emotional Freedom Technique, tapping. So if you've ever seen anyone tapping these different points of their body, I am a EFT practitioner, and yes, Box is awesome. I love it. You can go through their website. Make sure you go to like the original Box, because I know there's imposters. But yeah, just check it out and see what you find. And then let me know. Let me know if it was helpful. Tapping, it was something that I feel like I fall into all this stuff. Like I don't actively seek these things, and then I get information about it. And tapping is one of them, because back in the day when I was working for an agency, we were in a program director's meeting, and I saw one of my coworkers. She was tapping under the table. She was tapping her hand under the table, and I was like, what is she doing? What is that weird thing she was doing? And I asked her, and she said, I'm tapping. And I was like, oh, okay. And so she was like, you've got to go and learn about tapping, especially if you work with people that experience trauma. And I was like, okay. So I went, and I thought it was the weirdest thing I'd ever heard. Now, again, this is before I kind of got into all the energy work that I do. And the man that was leading the training had said, pick something that you're struggling with, on a scale from 0 to 10, pick something that's like maybe a 3 or a 4, not something super significant, and we'll tap on it as a group. And I didn't know these people. I didn't want to pick something that was really like embarrassing. Didn't want shadow revealed. But I picked something that I'd been struggling with that just was kind of nagging. And we were tapping, and we were learning about it. And he, asked us to rate how we were feeling. And I was like at like a 0 or 1. I was like, how is this thing that's sort of been in the background, how is that gone? So he said, okay, for the next week, I want you to tap on something bigger, something that you've really been struggling with, something that is probably up by like 7 or 8 or maybe even 9. And so we went home. We worked on it. I was a very diligent student, and I did it every day. That's what you're recommended to do. And we were supposed to come back and kind of process it. And I couldn't believe the change. This thing that was like a thorn in my side for probably several years, something that had happened between me and another person that was really just stressful, just really stressful. And it was somebody that I would have to continue to see on a pretty frequent basis. Every time I saw that person, I was like, right? It was gone. And the next time I interacted with that person, it wasn't like triggering for me. I wasn't reactive. And I'm like, okay, there's definitely something to tapping then. It's you're hitting acupressure points. You're talking it out. Basically, you're talking about the stressor. You're talking about the thing that's triggering for you. But at the same time, you're calming the body. So what happens is the brain learns a new message of like that thing, that person, that event, that experience, and I'm in control of myself. Instead of that thing, that event, that person, whatever that circumstance, and I'm freaking out, right? So that was huge. That was really interesting. And the studies, this is something that actually is more helpful for people that have PTSD from war, or from military experience. I guess it just doesn't have to be war, but that was what the study was. Then talk therapy, which is what I do. So I'm like, oh, game changer. So I really like this one for shadow work because it goes to that core, that foundation. Yeah, it's a really good one for dealing with shadow because it really builds up that foundation of worth and value. And it helps you work through all of those things. It brings to light all of the things that you're telling yourself about the event or about the experience, about yourself, that are false. And so it softens that. And then we're able to integrate that, which is huge. So the other thing, and tapping is really cool because you can use it for anything. You have a big presentation that you are wanting to do well on, or you have something that feels like you want to do well on it, you can tap on that. It doesn't always have to be a negative thing. My former colleague and I, we used to always tap together, just randomly, just practicing, just doing whatever. And it's always interesting what comes from that, right? I feel like doors open up when we start to do a little bit of healing work. So tapping is huge. I am going to offer a really quick tapping course in, I think it's August. It's August. It's after the Soul Journey group coaching ends. So if anyone's interested in that, eventually I'll have that posted. But I'll teach you about tapping, and we'll do a few weeks of working through whatever is a big one for you. The last two kind of go hand in hand, working with self-compassion and self-care. So learning how to love ourselves, how to send ourselves compassion, how to support ourselves emotionally. How do we have a practice of self-care, a daily practice of self-care? So I know some people call this like emotional hygiene. I don't know why that word just makes me cringe, but self-care. Self-care is what I know. And so there are lots of resources out there for self-compassion, lots of resources out there for self-care. I know I promise this is my last shameless plug. If you're struggling with self-care, odds are it's something in shadow. Something in shadow is holding you back from really looking at your needs and actively engaging in activities that bring you relief, support, relaxation, whatever it might be. That I can tell you. And a lot of times with self-care, for me, I feel like there's an important component of healing the inner child, sort of understanding what those wounds are, reconnecting with the inner child, and really, caring for all aspects of yourself, right? That's exactly what we're doing with shadow work. All aspects are okay. And so with self-care, if you feel like it's not for me, it's for other people, yeah, that's shadow. So I do have it's a self-paced group program. It's prompts, journal prompts, it's affirmations, it's meditations, it's a little bit of coursework, all around self-care. There is the component of healing the inner child. I think I have it for 27. I can't remember what it is, but it was a group that I did, a month-long group. So you get just a ton of information for the month. And so that can be an option for self-care, self-compassion, anything from Kristen Neff, NEFF, Tara Brock those are, there it is. There's where you need to go. I know Brene Brown does a lot of work with self-compassion. She does a lot of neat stuff that she integrates into her own life. So there's lots of opportunities to learn about self-compassion. Those are probably my favorites. So those are my top 6 tips. If you want to do it yourself, you don't want to work with, totally fine. Sometimes we need to go that route, right? Sometimes we just need to go the route that feels good for us, that we can support our change in our own way. Sometimes that shadow just really feels like, oh, I do not want to bring it to other people. I do not want to share this with other people. Shadow work, I don't really recommend shadow work in groups. It can be healing and can be cathartic, but I feel like if you're new to it, if it's something that you haven't tried before, I do think that working one-on-one with somebody, however it is, shamanic, practitioner, therapist, Reiki master, whatever it ends up being, to do that one-on-one for the beginning, and then you can sort of evolve out into other work as well. These tips are incredible, empowering, and hopeful. Oh, thank you. Well, thank you. And I just have a couple affirmations. I'm not going to give you a little tidbit of any of those things, but I probably could, especially the Reiki and the tapping and the self-care. But some of the affirmations that sort of shift the way that we look at shadow is, I'm beginning to learn, because we want to put it in language that our subconscious, unconscious mind can get behind. I'm beginning to learn to love myself fully. That's a huge one. We have to love all parts of ourselves. Once we start acknowledging and sending love and compassion and healing to that shadow, it becomes less of a monster. And we're able to really balance. Remember, we want to balance those strengths and those positive qualities that we have. And know that we're never going to eliminate shadow. That's not the purpose, but it's how can we kind of coexist, right? How can we understand that that's something that I'm sensitive to, but I have these other things as well. So I'm beginning to love myself fully. It's safe. It's safe to love all of the parts of me. That's something that we don't often hear as kids. We get, punished when we act out. We get punished when we're upset. We get dirty looks. We get, nasty tone, whatever we get. And so we learn that it's not safe to have those emotions. It's not safe to express myself. And we want it to be, at least bare minimum, safe to express it to yourself, right? My value and my worth are always stable. They should be. They may not feel that way right now, but they should be. And you can always change this to, I'm learning, I'm accepting, I'm working on, whatever makes it feel better. I'm deserving of love, compassion, joy, happiness, whatever that thing is that feels very elusive, that because of this shadow, it gets tampered down. Add that, right? I'm deserving of, because you absolutely are. Absolutely are. No conditions, no exceptions. You are deserving of those things. Who you are in the moment right now. So I think that's, I'm learning. I'm open to, I'm deserving. I don't know. We got to kind of fiddle around with that one. And my last one is, when I see myself as whole, I am free to explore my passions and my life purpose. So until we integrate, until we soften, until we heal some of that shadow, we're never going to feel fully whole, number one, but we're never going to feel like we're able to branch out and follow with clarity our life purpose, our passion. And shadow work is one of those ways that we can integrate that, soften that. I know I've said it 100 times, but it's so important. And so, that's one thing when people are like, oh, I don't know why I'm here, or I don't know what to do, or here in this world type of thing. And I don't really have any passion. I'm like, oh, shadow work. So, there's always a little bit of work for us to do, no matter where we are. I continue to peel back the layers, just like with anything else. I sort of peel back the layers of shadow for myself, and I keep working on that. That's not going to end, but I'm open to that. I'm accepting of that. Even the crappy pieces, or even the pieces that people might judge or criticize, they're who I am. So it's okay. If I'm going to be proud of myself, I have to kind of love myself. So there's that piece. I'm going to add, this isn't the affirmation, but I'm going to sneak something in. When we work on shadow, one of the byproducts is we open ourselves up to receiving abundance. So I know we talked last time about lack and scarcity. I know we talked about opening ourselves to receiving abundance. If it still feels like there's some roadblock, some blind spot, something that I can't get past to receive abundance, it might be shadow. So if you work through, I can't guarantee what kind of abundance you'll receive, but you might find that you start to receive. One of my clients, we were talking about relationships, just having abundance of healthy and loving relationships, friendships, or, partners, whatever it might be. And one of the messages that she received as a kid sort of invalidated that. And it was like, oh, I just want to shake the person that said this to her. But it was, if you find a man that can love you, marry him. If we hear something like that as kids, we're going to invalidate that, like, I'm worthy, I have value, I get to pick, I get to pick my partner, or somebody, there's more people than that one person that can settle for us, right? So, when we worked through that aspect of shadow, it was interesting because we were talking about what relationships do you have in your life now? Healthier friends, starting to date, and starting to recognize when she's dating somebody that the red flags are going up quicker, and this is not somebody for me. Just because they're interested in me doesn't mean that I have to be interested in them. So able to exit the relationships that don't feel healthy or supportive or loving, or are meeting her needs. And so has she found that person yet? No, but I feel like it's process, right? We're just working on it. But I think, whatever that abundance that we're seeking, so it doesn't always have to be financial, it doesn't always have to be money, but whatever health, vitality, whatever we're seeking for abundance, working with shadow, softening and integrating it really opens us up to receiving, because now we feel like, yeah, I deserve that. I deserve that happiness. I deserve that partner, as opposed to just some random dude that is willing to marry me. Yeah, don't settle for that. So that is my I know it's more than 2 cents, but that's my 2 cents. That's my take on shadow work. If you found this helpful, I would love to hear back from you. If you have more questions, feel free to reach out. If you would like to work together, there's a variety of ways we can work together. If you're looking for resources, who's that person you said, or what is that thing? Feel free to reach out to me and I'll get back to you. And then, you can always come to the next Q&A. Oh, so that's another thing. So I will not be doing a live on the 14th. I will be out of town, but I will return on the 21st. So if you have any questions, and I don't even have my sheet in front of me, I can't remember what we're working on. We would just finish the new moon, so we might be working on something related to that. I can't remember. I think it's relationships and boundaries, but now I have to really think about that. I can't remember what we're working on, but I'll put it up on my website. So hopefully everything, very helpful. I'm glad to hear that. All right, so everybody have a fabulous weekend, and hopefully we will connect again soon. All right.